Okay, so we're going to start the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for January 24th. We are recording, so that you are recording, please let us know. Silence your cell phones. That'll be appreciated. First, we'll do public comment. Any items from the public not being heard tonight? Excellent. Seeing that, go to the public hearing. Notices of intent. We have a couple continuances. Meesenberg, 30 Wawinnet Road. It's continued till February 7th. And Sconset Beach Preservation Fund.
We'll talk about that for a second. You have to open it.
Okay, well, it's continued till February 21st, but we are going to talk about it a little bit.
So I was just going to say, the meeting on the 21st, I think that the intent of that meeting isn't to get, as long as they get approval to file the notice by the selectmen on the meeting on the 7th, they'll be scheduled for that night. But I think the intent of that night isn't to get the full presentation. It's to just set a schedule to hear it separate from our regular agenda to hopefully avoid meetings till 10 o'clock at night. Those things can get it separated, but to get that announced at the regular hearing, and then that way everyone's consultants, everyone's attorneys, everyone's experts, whoever's coming can come and we can just focus on Wisconsin Bluff. That's all kind of pending the schedule shifting, depending on how fast they go through the selectmen process to get authorized for the use of town land. So that's kind of the monkey wrench to it. So I just wanted to make that clear. So if people in this room are representing people or bringing over personnel, that first hearing at the regular meeting is probably not the one to do it. We won't be taking any direct testimony. It'll be just to set the schedule, continue to that date, and then get comfier chairs, drinks, snacks.
Coffee chairs. They used to give us.
And really quickly, too, just to add one last thing to the agenda, we did get a file number for 4 Ames Ave. It's SE 483046.
2830?
SC 4830.
Number 5, 3046 is Brandt at 4 Ames Ave.
Okay. We also have one more continuance in the request for determination. It's Elder, 42 Liberty Street, is continued until the 7th of February as well. Okay, so we're going to start with 12 North Road Trust, 12 North Road.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Kevin Neal, representing 12 North Road Trust. Unfortunately, I was unable to be here at the last hearing on the 10th, but I understand there were some questions about the status of the pre-1978 dwelling on the property and whether or not that impinged on or in any way affected the repair of the bulkhead. And the simple answer is it does not. The timelines are very important here. The bulkhead was original notice of intent filed in April of 1999. The order of conditions issued. The bulkhead was constructed during the summer of 2002. The certificate of compliance was issued by the Commission for the bulkhead in October 2002. At all of those times, the pre-1978 Rock Lewis house was located on the property in its then current configuration and had been there for more than 50 years, way before 1978. Anything that happened after the bulkhead was permitted is irrelevant to whether or not there should be a repair to the bulkhead. The local bylaw is very clear. The performance standards for coastal banks say specifically that no new bulkheads shall be allowed unless they're to protect the pre-78 structure. This is not a new bulkhead. This is a pre-existing bulkhead that was properly permitted before anything happened to the pre-78 dwelling. Clearly, after the certificate of compliance issued for this bulkhead in October 2002, more than a year later, there were significant renovations. One structure was moved from the property. Substantial renovation was done to the house. All of that occurred We don't deny that, but it has nothing whatsoever to do with whether or not this bulkhead may be repaired as we're requesting in this current notice of intent. It's a request to repair and maintain this bulkhead, which we can do, I would submit, forever, irrespective of what's on the lot, because it's a pre-existing grandfathered bulkhead, and the bylaws are pretty clear about that. So, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think that all of the debris was removed from behind the bulkhead. Stan Humphreys from LEC submitted a letter outlining the agreement and obligation of the owner to do nourishment, continue doing nourishment. And at this point, it's been almost a year. We'd ask that you vote for the order of conditions and allow the repair to forward.
So to follow up on Kevin's point, because we were asked, I had a pretty lengthy conversation with Mark Bartow from the Southeast Regional DEP. He's kind of our circuit person. He shows all our file numbers and does that. He also discussed this very issue of constructing bulkheads, getting permits to construct bulkheads, and then activities that go on afterwards. And it's been their position, I'll spare you the description, matches Kevin's description, where if it was legally permitted and installed, then with whatever activities are going on the lot, as long as if they require permits, they were permitted and installed, those structures are allowed to be maintained. They could also say is you can always encourage switching to other methods if you wish. You can ask for it nicely, but they said at this point that's been my policy. But they also did contend too that no one has really pushed that into adjudication and really gone for it to kind of play that out. But that's been their position to this point.
Did this project must have come before the countdown again as a new house, as a renovated house was being constructed, right? So it occurred to me reading through this that, then would have been the time to order the removal.
Well, in 2000,
If that was
2003, 2004, the current owner applied for a notice of intent to construct a dwelling, swimming pool, and make other improvements. That the commission issued the order of conditions. Project went forward. Their certificate of compliance was issued for that more than 10 years ago, and that's been buttoned up. So in terms of permitting, at least from my review, all of the notices of intents and orders of conditions that have been issued for the property have been properly complied with. Certificates of compliance have issued for each of them.
So I just have a question, because it looks like condition number 1 under general conditions for, it looks like the dated 2001, so this must pertain to that. Condition number 1 says failure to comply with all conditions stated herein and with all related statutes and other regulatory measures shall be deemed cause to revoke or modify this order. So if they weren't putting nourishment, which they weren't, and they clearly broke some of the conditions in this order, that general condition number 1 says that we could revoke part of that order. And that would have to do with the bulkhead.
Well, I'd submit that once the certificate of compliance issues under that order, it supersedes anything else. Now, I don't think that failure to nourish is an event that requires removal of the bulkhead. It may require enforcement action, may require a penalty, but we're looking prospectively here. You're going to nourish. You want to keep going forward and doing everything that's required to correct the situation, keeping in mind that my client's responding to an enforcement order from the commission and trying to use the best practices to comply with the rules and regulations of the commission, including nourishment.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this. Valid point. I mean, we do it all the time. Great Harbor Yacht Club, the condos to the north of Great Harbor Yacht Club, they're all post 78. They rebuilt those all up and down Grand Point. So it's not it's a pretty standard practice for us actually. Granted, this is a big fault, this is a big fact. That makes it differences. So I'm hesitant to deny the maintenance on it, and I think you're got a point. I think from the code. From my point of view.
And if DEP, would disagree with our assessment, then an appeal would likely end us up in court and go through all that, and kind of rough to live by all that.
Yeah.
Right, it just needs to be, I think Ashley's point is well taken on the maintenance and nourishment component, especially of the communities, needs to be very important
That's the
and
only way to
enforced.
protect our resource areas.
Great.
I mean, that's a big problem, especially if it's no longer protecting something that gets protection and it hasn't been maintained.
Right.
I'd certainly be agreeable. My client need to well-defined conditions and protocols in the order of conditions that you choose to issue, addressing the time frames and the requirements for nourishment. So it can be monitored, if you want monitoring, submission to commission of photos and evidence that nourishment has taken place, timelines to do that. I think that would be helpful, not just for this application, but to make sure that nourishment is done in a timely manner and right way.
And actually laying out failure removal if it's not done.
Yeah.
Because right now it's just slap on the wrist, and the problem is on the areas we protect are being damaged.
Right.
Do we have an estimate of the nourishment volumes required?
I think there's a letter from OEC letter from Stan Humphries who sets those forth.
Yeah, it was in the proposal that we discussed.
Okay.
And then do we end up discussing fining?
I think you can discuss a punitive action if you so choose. Let's figure out what that would be.
I
And
think
it
that's
would
something
be
we need to
for-
discuss with this one. I mean, they dumped a bunch of debris on the beach. They had a whole illegal construction to get it there, and they haven't been nourishing.
Yeah. Does the fine start from the point of notification?
I think you could have to, I think you could discuss, if you wanted, that would be, I think, the earliest you could start would be the issuing of the enforcement action. And you could discuss if, what ended that punitive section was filing a notice or getting those things in, or issuing an order. I tend to think setting a kind of an appropriate time frame, kind of within the scale that we've had. We've only had one other punitive action in the last while that involved fining. So we have some work to do on to fix that. But I think that would be something that you could decide, and certainly discuss. I think you're really only dealing with the one violation in places doing it there. So it's not like you have 10 different resource areas and 10 different violations and things that are there. But if you decided to go from issuing of enforcement action to response by the applicant or filing the notice of intent, this has definitely gone on with questions and things, and I don't necessarily think going through the process and there responding to questions to string it out. You guys can ask questions to string it out for forever if you're going to take that action. But I think if you guys had an idea what that would be, that's something we could certainly figure out what that number would be. And then you're looking, typically it's been, $50 kind of per day. So if you're looking at 100 days, it's $5,000. But that's what the town bylaw allows for.
If I may, we received a notice of enforcement action in March 2017, and reasonably, diligently responded to it, set up a meeting with Jeff, looked into how to correct everything. My client hired LEC, Jeff Blackwell, Perry, to come up with a proposal for the commission, filed a notice of intent. We've acted in good faith to try to remedy the situation. And I do think it would be inequitable and unfair to levy a fine on the owner for somehow failing to respond to the enforcement action.
So maybe we need the contractor again. Whoever dumped all that stuff in the resource area, and they're going to have to come forward.
This was behind the bulkhead though, correct?
Yeah, the brick and
Yeah, I
masonry.
mean, there was some junk in there, but,
There was a lot of junk in there. And whoever did that probably knew better. I mean, my feeling is we need to start fixing this.
I guess I'm just trying to think how, considering it was mixed in with a lot of more native material, and it has all been removed, I mean, how much harm was done? Because it wasn't in there for very long. I mean, it just seems,
They also haven't been nourishing though. So it's,
Well, they
so if
haven't
we're
been
talking
nourishing.
I'm
about
thinking more than nourishing. It's not.
yeah,
Yeah,
nourishment's more of a problem.
the stone too though.
No.
I mean,
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's a whole group.
I mean, we can puzzle out some
Yeah.
choices in between now and the next meeting if there's instructions for an order. Another option that we may have may be to do something where you, I think we've done on other projects, require some sort of performance bonding against the nourishment project, so that if it's not done satisfactorily or done on time, that's something that the commission has discretion to activate. And that's essentially money that's held to rectify if that ties with the failure criteria. That may also include either renourishing, removal, repair, or whatever it is. That's an option. But I think if that's the direction we want to go, I think we can present you guys a number of legally defendable choices to pick from that will hopefully accomplish the task that you're looking
So is the fine, do we have to have that accompanied with an enforcement action?
Well, they've already been issued an enforcement action is what started this process.
Was that for failure to nourish though, or was it just for the?
No, that was for the fill.
Fill, yeah.
Do we have clearly defined nourishment calculations in the previous order conditions? So we might not have to do this.
Yeah, but we still have
I know what we would.
the rubble and junk dumped on the beach, because there's another special condition in your condition that talks about the material that's allowed to be back there. And the crushed sonotube, some rebar in there, bricks.
Right.
That's clearly not
Yeah, there was a lot of
clean
junk that was-
fill material that's in there first
Right.
order. So I think that we can certainly address what happened last March or whatever the date was, up until they had a clear plan to remove it.
Well, we have to move it.
Yeah.
It's out of the resource area, it's out of the buffer zone. Get it off the property. I mean, I understand that there were problems in the past, but I think it's critical to be prospective, move forward. Fashion a word that's binding, well-defined, provides for remedies in the event there's no nourishment. My client clearly wants to comply. Wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here today if he didn't. So I think at this stage, your efforts are best spent looking forward in a new order of conditions that spells everything out.
Other questions? Some public. Any public comments, questions concerning 12 North Street? No? Okay. Well, yeah, we can discuss.
Yeah, and we can put together a manual policy, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have everything you need to close.
We do. You guys are here. So we have other technical pieces.
Oh, okay. That's close. Okay. Someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, move close.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Could we perhaps schedule the vote on the order for not the next hearing, but the one after that?
Well, we're supposed to issue within 21 days.
Yeah.
So I would say if you want to push it to the next one, if you could request that in writing,
I will.
that way we're covered on that 21 day.
I'm not going to be here for next year. I'll let the PJ
So,
get a chance to look at it.
certainly, yeah, just send them in writing.
Okay,
We can go from there.
thank you.
Thank you.
Won't mess this up.
What's that?
You're gonna hold the vote on this one?
Well, I haven't drafted it.
Okay, okay.
But we'll definitely discuss it about
Yeah.
possible orders.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I think Kevin just asked for that when there's a draft in hand, but
Right. I like it. Okay. So the next is R. Thomas and James R. Okenak, trustees, 2023 Mass Ave. Sure.
What we're requesting is a permission to abandon an existing septic system and to replace it with a tight tank out of the buffer zone, but still within the lands. Wait a second, is it out of the buffer zone? Across the street, it's pretty close to being out of the buffer zone, but it's still within land subject to coastal storm flowage and a few other things. This is out at 23 and 20 Mass Ave. Number 20 is where the where the leach field, or the tight tanks are going. There'd be 2,000-gallon tanks, two 2,000-gallon tanks. The existing system goes to a septic tank, metal septic tank, a leach pit, and there's also a gray water tank for laundry in there. Those are all metal, and what's being proposed, we were asking for either to pump them out and leave them in place, especially, I mean, we're very constrained. It's right up against the property line. These are the septic tank, and this leach pit is actually out in the coastal dune. So what we would like to do is pump those out and then to fill them with a clean sand or a slurry of sand. We had originally asked possibly a flowable concrete, and Natural Heritage, who has reviewed this, was fine with it except for putting concrete in there. So we're not going to put concrete in there. We're going to put it filled with clean sand. That may require access by putting down plywood on top of the dune, and to go over it and fill it with either wheelbarrows or if there's a way to pump it in or conveyor it in. The septic, the line will cross the street and go over to the leach, tight tanks on the other side of the road. I've got two of them going on at the same time. All areas will be, disturbed areas will be loamed and seed as appropriate. And if dewatering is necessary to put in the tight tanks, then it would be done by pumping it from up into the upland portion of that lot outside of the buffer zone. There are waivers requested for work in the coastal dune and work within 25 feet of a coastal dune. As you can see, there's no other reasonable access. These, we're leaving the tanks because we don't have really good access in there. And if the house is eventually moved or rebuilt or whatever, they would be pulled out at that time.
Questions?
So, I'm just making sure, I don't abut here at Audubon. This is a different lot thing, huh? Or am I abutting that?
It looks like you're abutting that.
I didn't get a notice that I know of, but,
No, you were free.
so I'm okay, huh?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
This is a second lot.
okay. Or it's not on that lot, so.
It's on this lot and that. I can't answer that. That was the abutters list of the, it shows up as two separate lots on the, when you go to the G assessors.
Well, I guess I could recuse if it would be safer, but
I don't see any financial gain.
no, I'm not gonna, no.
I think you're probably good.
I think you
Okay.
did. Okay. Any other questions? Not from me.
Did the health department approve this?
I'm not sure yet.
Sounds like,
Yeah.
This is within the approved tight tank district
Right.
line, so this is kind of where most of this is.
I think they're under an order to put it in.
Yeah. No, probably.
There's a lot of them that are getting letters responding to those letters.
Any questions from the public? No. Seeing none, Jeff, we have everything we need. We do. You're ready to close? Someone like to close? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
I should always do so easy.
Eel Point Beach LLC, 121 Eel Point.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent to the property at 121 Eel Point Road. I believe you probably all on the commission, maybe a couple of years ago when we permitted the zigzag sand drift fence at this property, which has been in place for a few years. They've been going through nourishment and planting activities, and would like to modify that arrangement to go with a solid quad fiber anchored array, the so-called Wilkinson array, and we would remove the fence and follow all of the same conditions that have been imposed on the other projects that have been similarly permitted. There's no real change in the design, other than I would like to go to two rows higher in this area than the projects that were in the harbor, just because of the different wave climate and height that we get on the sound versus the harbor. I think that it's important to not have the array over topped, and so that's the only material difference from what you've seen in the past. The first roll and reinforced lift would get set sort of just below the beach level that's there now. The area suffered a good amount of erosion during the storm at the beginning of the year, so this really is an ideal time to come in and build the system back into the bank. It'll be a little bit of a retreat. I've met with Seth out there and looked at it. He doesn't think we'd actually need to bring in a whole lot of material for the way this would initially be placed, and then we would get on to the annual sand nourishment project as part of the ongoing maintenance. And we would do the same where we pre-vegetate the upper rolls. Again, this is a good time of year if we were able to get permits to get this all in motion and try to get it in before the season, with concerns for the birds on the beach, and then obviously the summer season. We have proposed access, as the other projects have, along this beach down through 40th Pole, and I've had discussions with the land bank director, we have past arrangements with them for sort of the conditions of the use of that. We can't bring materials through there. It's just for machines on and off once a day, subject to notification and pre and post photographs, using essentially the same vehicle access that cars use to go on the beach there. We are subject to natural heritage review for that reason. The project itself is not within the mapped area, but the access is, and so out of an abundance of caution, I filed also with them. It seems to me we already have driving activity where we're driving. It's really not changing use, but it is associated with this project, so it seems, and I would expect to have a response that's likely a time of year restriction, such as we already had for the other project, which we have a current order for. And we've proposed to stop on the eastern side, 10 feet back from the bank, from the neighbor's property line, from the common property line. Whereas on the westerly side, we propose to taper it in, but to go to the property line because that abutter has the drip fence as well and is all under ongoing nourishment. I've been working for them for some time, and so they may end up being interested in the same type of a thing or not, but at least there's already nourishment being put there. So that's the reason for the difference that you see on the plan between the separation to the property lines. You can see on the eastern side, the bank has come back there a little bit. And so, I want we're not in any way trying to recreate coastal bank or resource area or hold out. We're just trying to get set in this stabilization so that we can hopefully retain a vegetated, stable bank. And it's been quite successful on, some of the other projects. So we would hope for the same for here. We have to address questions and concerns. You can see on the plan I have noted the sand and material delivery at the top of the bank, which is again the same exact method that we've been using for several years on this property. He actually has a conveyor belt system that we've been using due to some of the landscape and difficulties that exist with access. And then spread the material along the beach. We probably would need an excavator and a front end loader for the initial install, and then after that it would be just most likely a small skid steer to do the nourishment along the bottom. That's what we've been able to do more recently. And like I said, we will ultimately ask for a continuance for our natural heritage, but that would also give me an opportunity to provide any information that the commission may want should you have additional questions.
I can't really tell from these pictures because it looks like the sands come up significantly around the sandbird fence.
So what happened, in my opinion, is that you had a lot of erosion of the unconsolidated sediment that had been placed behind the fence in that area as part of the nourishment fill for the last couple of years. So I think a lot of that just got moved down. The beach after the storm is very wide, fairly high. I've seen monitoring this site, and really this shoreline. There can be quite a fluctuation in the elevation of the beach, and that's not always as apparent, but it is when you have drift fence. You see where your beach one day you see the close to the bottom of the pickets, and the next you're up like we are on this picture. I guess that's my long way of saying yes. I think it's at a higher elevation. Some of it is probably also wind captured, as we hope that the fence does. I will tell you that I was a little bit back and forth on whether to try to ask you or propose to keep the fence and do this. I know from past, permanent experience with you that sort of does cross the line into the CES category, and we're not looking for a CES, and we, I feel that getting the stable bank is more important than trying to, have the struggle, if you will, over permitting a coastal engineering structure at this site.
So then it looks like you'll probably need to excavate some of that to put the tubes in, or
yeah, there would be a slight bit of excavation. As I said, the first roll, what you really don't want to have happen in these systems is that you put your first row too high, and then a storm comes and it drops it, and you can get a sluicing. So yes, there would certainly be a small bit of excavation essentially to set that first row, and that's the sand that gets used for building the system in the lifts. So ultimately, that's why we don't believe that we actually would have to bring in very much material to do this, because you're working with that material that's there in an effort to set that in. In terms of, we're not looking to disturb essentially what is, you can see in the picture where that sort of escarpment, there'll be a small section right along where it's already disturbed and gonna fall. They basically haven't, I've been out on the sites in the last year while they've been building these, and there needs to be a cleanup. That's part of, using the excavator. So what's already compromised and gonna fall, again, that's all material though that you then use and incorporate into the lifts that you then run the handheld compactor behind it, and then put that all back together. So not I think a lot of excavation. Again, we never want to, in my opinion, on the coastal banks, to the extent possible, you never want to disturb the naturally consolidated material, because it has a greater resistance to erosion and instability than any of the unconsolidated materials that you place. So it's very valuable when you get to, and in this area, there's a lot of windblown deposits from the time, so it's not as quite consolidated as some of the other areas where it's more glacially compacted. There's a layer that goes through here that's down a little bit lower. The lower materials are certainly more compacted, and then up above, but it's been there for thousands of years. It's not new type deposits.
Would you have to, so you don't want to dig into the bank itself?
Only the sort of top little piece where what I did was to show the line on the plan, sort of where you have this slump line, and so that kind of would get cleaned up back into that material there. On this end, we may drop a couple of rows. I think we might not go quite as high. I want to permit it at the full height, but I think that's going to be sort of an infield decision whether to step it down at that very end, because it does start to taper off a little bit for that reason. And we would come back to the as-built. It would always be less than what was permitted.
It'd be good to see how one of these does up.
And then again, you have the other one that was just installed that you permitted at, I think it's 141. And so, and this one will have the lifts associated with it as well. And again, I have sent the owner all of the conditions before we even started it on this, and said this is what you can expect, and this is what I need to present that he'll agree to. And he's amenable to that, and he's been I've provided some honor reports in the past on this. I've all notified Jeff when we're doing nourishment activities at this site. Again, this site doesn't have some of the same complications as the others that already had bar tubes that were replacing. So it's typically just been and the fence hasn't suffered damage in this location. So it's typically just been straight nourishment that's been going on for the last few years. And plantings, and the plantings are all just doesn't it? Yeah, it just doesn't hold, which is why we're looking for stability.
Did you have? It didn't look like it, but they didn't have the mesh on them plantings like some of. Did you have to achieve?
Yes, there would be. It's.
Did you have it before?
No, we didn't before. No, we didn't. We didn't put any, because the upper part of this bank was natural.
Yeah.
Still, it hadn't quite reached that point, and the lower part, we didn't use coir netting on the plantings on that. It just would slide. And it would make more of a mess inside the tree. Again, it was all pure loose sand.
Yeah, I'm not sure what those. Really perfect to stand on stuff down there.
Does.
And then you see those pictures of front of windows.
Yeah. Yeah. extreme for
So
sure.
even overhead pickup, a little pile of wood.
Yeah, well, I think that's another project we could talk about, which there was damage to, a couple of the other projects that were actually the logs, and I think that it could be, or the tubes, it can be difficult to differentiate between the material that they used to make the envelope tubes versus that which is used on the surface. I certainly think on the stuff that's used on the surface shouldn't extend to the area subject to the wave action. Essentially, your sacrificial enrichment area, you should probably stop it somewhere, maybe elevation 7 or something like that. And then on the bottom piece, just know that's where and much like that's where the plantings don't really make a lot of sense because you're doing a nourishment activity there at that lower level.
It's gonna get washed out anyway.
Right.
Other questions?
Seems pretty standard.
Seems like it.
We're still waiting for a file number two, Mr.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. So, whether we wanted to or not.
Okay, any questions from the public? Okay.
I request a continuance for 2
Please.
weeks, and hopefully we have the additional information.
Thank you.
Yes,
We have granite, 4 Ames Ave.
Good afternoon again for David Haynes for the applicant. A few weeks ago, about a month ago, I came before you, and a month before that, I came before you with the relocation of the house over 353 Nantucket, and also the removal of the septic system. That septic system was served by the house that we're talking about tonight at 4 Ames Ave. What we're proposing to do is to relocate the house back. This is a highly eroding bank. It's lost, the numbers vary, 50 feet since Labor Day at least. And the owner would like to be able to relocate his house. Also, the septic system has been removed. This house is still sitting there, but so he needs to relocate and he's going in for a tight tank on the property. The location that's shown here to relocate the house to is mostly outside of the buffer zone, and it meets zoning setbacks. We are going before the zoning board of appeals tomorrow night to see if we can get those reduced and maybe get it completely outside of the buffer zone, maximize the setback. If the commission could support that application, it would be appreciated.
We always support minimal disturbance to our buffers.
And it would be,
So get it farther from the bank.
get it
as far
farther
from the bank
farther
as
from the bank.
possible.
But this is, right now, and the existing house has a foundation. They would like to put a foundation in. The foundation that would be outside of the buffer zone now. I've advised against putting a foundation in, but sometimes people won't listen to me. Seems, but anyway, and the proposed tight tank is going outside of the buffer zone. This is the buffer zone. The only thing that would be on this plan that would remain in the buffer zone is a portion of the deck that would be on piers. Any existing utilities, right now there are electric lines and various other things sticking out and pipes sticking out. Anything that is not necessary for utilities would be removed from the buffer zone, and all areas would be backfilled with clean sand and then treated with loam and seed. But we are going to pick up the house. The existing foundation would be removed and filled with clean sand and loam and seed.
What will be the setbacks? What would be the distance of the property lines?
Excuse me?
What have you filed with the CBA?
I think he's asked for 5 on the front, and I'm not sure what on the side. But that would get it outside of the buffer. I think I have Jeff to thank for getting the file.
Jeff, on an eroding bank, it's our buffer zone plus the erosion
Well,
rate?
But not outside the buffer.
There's a minimum. So if it's outside the buffer zone, it's outside the buffer zone. If it's within, I'll pull it up real quick here. It's 20 times the erosion rate, or 50 feet, whichever is the lesser of the two.
In this case.
50 feet, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we do not want a foundation on this thing.
If it gets out of jurisdiction,
Yeah.
then you obviously can't condition it.
So do you need something from us as a support for the ZBA, or just is this discussion enough, or
Well, it would be nice when they go,
Added into our.
have Jeff write your
When
letter?
are they going for the ZBA?
I think tomorrow.
Email good enough?
Yeah.
Well, I'll reach out to their administrator and let them know that we are supportive of maximizing their distance.
Yeah.
I can't remember when the ZBA hearing is. I think 3.
That's all right. I will track it down. And let them know.
Any questions on this one?
Sounds like a good idea to
Seems
do
like a
it.
good idea. Any questions from the public? Okay. Jeff, do we have everything you need here? No, we did.
No, we
did.
did. It is 3046.
3046. Okay, ready to close?
Yes, please.
Do we have a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Managed to manufacture a number for this one. For 20.
Okay.
I explained the circumstances of the house deemed not fit for habitation, and then trying to run away from that.
Leave it up in the crib.
My argument is convincing.
Nice little crib. Thanks. Flint Hill Partners LLC, 74 Westchester. There, Jeff.
That's what you gave, what you want. That's the December 15th.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors, representing the applicant Vondale and Hunter in Bodette on behalf of the current property owner. I will try to be brief, summarize all our past meetings, and kind of hopefully bring this to a closure. This is a request for an order of conditions to complete work at 74 Westchester Street, in which the existing order of conditions has expired and the work was not completed satisfactorily enough to obtain a certificate of compliance. So what we currently have before you is that a new order of conditions, which we will need to complete the work. The intent, I will say, after many go-arounds and hearing, the intent is to complete the work as per the original order with 2 modifications. One, there was a stand of 3 Russian olives that were in the middle of the site in an existing landscape bed that were right here in the middle of the site. We would ask that those 3 Russian olives be able to stay within that raised landscape bed. We had targeted those as part of the invasive removal originally. The project originally was approved for 190 square feet of structure within the 50-foot no-build. It was as-built and constructed at 170 square feet, so there was a 20 square foot reduction in that component of the original application. The original application set forth approximately 8,000 square feet of buffer zone restoration, which is basically would have been the 25-foot no-disturb zone. There was approximately 8,000 square feet of restoration depicted on the original approved order of conditions. And as we have discussed, there is an existing gravel driveway that was in place when the original order was issued. The intent originally was to remove that gravel driveway. That gravel driveway comprises about approximately 850 square feet of on-the-ground footprint. So there's approximately 12% of that 8,000 square foot restoration is the existing driveway that we were asking, and under this order of conditions, to leave in place. The plan would be to leave that gravel driveway in its current configuration, and in turn provide a restoration planting plan, or to not only do the invasives removal to the south of the existing cottage, but to provide a complete shrub, landscaping, seed meadow grass restoration area from the back of the structure to the abutting property, which is oddly enough owned by the Nantucket Conservation, which is actually controlled by the Nantucket Conservation Commission, which would be the backside. So I'm talking about this area from the back of the existing cottage up to the property line, which is essentially where the existing wetland line is. That area is this area here, which is essentially, you have a lawn area, and then a stand of an area that we would be removing invasives from the backside, basically Japanese knotweed along the backside of the structure. So to kind of recap here, new order of conditions to complete the project as originally approved, with the exception of the request to leave the 3 Russian olives in place, and in turn leave the gravel driveway, and to mitigate that essentially at almost a 1.8 or close to 2-to-1 replication area, provide a landscape buffer between the back of the existing dwelling to the wetland edge that would reclaim that lawn area, and then also reclaim the area of which the is now the Japanese knotweed. The remainder of the site would be completed as far as restoration goes, in compliance with the original permit, which involved a rototilling of the existing lawn area and placement of little blue stem seed meadow, and then some shrubland plantings. The lawn area from the entire site is similar to kind of what you see here. It's not really a fully manicured type grass lawn. It's a lawn. It's mowed, but it's not a manicured, heavily maintained lawn area. So that is essentially the application before you. Obviously, we would complete the work, like I said, in accordance with the 2 other. There are other few items that we have to, still have to move some HQ units and things like that. But that was all part of the original order that we would be doing to complete anyway. And so the last plan that I had submitted was kind of somewhat of a modified restoration plan that would be completing it as I said, as per the original order conditions. And essentially, the Russian olive, I think, is a smaller component. The bigger issue is the driveway, and essentially would be doing the 2-to-1 kind of replication of leaving that gravel driveway in place. As I said, again, the driveway represents about 12% of what was the original 8,000 square feet restoration for the project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So this is the plan we should be looking at?
No. What I've got is I'm going to give you this. The plan. This is kind of a combined. This is a combined plan showing the red. The red is the original, what was originally approved. So that's what's going to be completed. Is what's on this red plan would be going back to the original approval that was in David Haynes's report. As I said, with the caveat of we're asking for the stand with the 3 Russian olives to stay, and we're also mitigating this back area here from the backside this way would be a 2-to-1, essentially a 2-to-1 replication area to mitigate the leaving of the 850 square feet of gravel driveway in place. And as I said, that driveway was in place at the time the property was originally purchased, and that was there when the Lanes owned the property. And it wasn't the gravel driveway wasn't something that was added after the fact. It was there as part of the original application. So what I would do is, if the commission can see fit to see that that's a direction that they think can bring this to a resolution, what I would do is I would submit an updated restoration plan with a specific shrub restoration plan for the backside of that cottage, which would be the 2-to-1 mitigation for the driveway. I think it's a resolution that kind of, it's essentially, as I said, the way I kind of look at it is kind of gone way around here, but we're essentially completing the project as approved and essentially asking for an amendment to the order for the driveway, and providing, I think, enough mitigation, whereas that's a justified amendment to that original order. So essentially, for all practical purposes, with the exception of the driveway, the 25-foot no disturb is reclaimed for the entire property. It's almost 7,200, 7,600 square feet of reclamation of that 25-foot no disturb.
I wonder, did you sit on this one originally?
Yes.
I must have, yeah.
The attorney was, yes.
Ernie, Andy, and Ian were.
Okay. Not that you remember the specifics of it, but I think we could probably have a discussion. Would this be, permissible? Like, had the original notice of intent come in to say, this is an existing driveway. Can we leave it and give back in like kind in a meaningful way at this end? With a full restoration plan, would that have passed muster at the time?
Well, if it would have been a new driveway proposal, I think we would have asked them to push it further out of the 25.
Right. But since it existed,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that changes my thinking a little bit on that.
I will say this with the driveway being existing. So what happened was the lane. I'm going by memory, but I think it was the lanes that owned the property. There were actually 2 outstanding orders on the Lane property for the site as it was developed when the former owner bought it, which was the cottage, the working, and everything else. So there were 2 certificate of compliance issued prior to us getting the last order, which had the driveway in it. And so there was a certificate of compliance issued for the site as it existed. I think at the time, the intent of the person who had bought it at the time was that they weren't going to use the driveway. They weren't. That was why it was offered. It was offered up because they didn't have any intention of using it. Shortly after they got into the project and started seeing, they had bought the property, started seeing how the property functioned with the front cottage, the front dwelling and the back cottage, the driveway became something that they obviously wanted to maintain. And did maintain. It's the same driveway that was there previously.
I'm not sure yet. Well, I think with, the 2-to-1 mitigation for an existing drive, that seems.
And I will say, even on a number of projects that we've seen over the years, I think the complete restoration of the 25 for a historically filled site and a historic, site that was there was a significant amount of restoration, I think, for that original application. So I don't necessarily like the way we got here.
Yeah.
Obviously, you all kind of know the back history, but in the way I'm trying to think of it is, it's an order of conditions to do the work that you approved. It will be done in accordance with your approval. The building is already done. It was less square footage than was originally proposed, and we're essentially asking for an amendment of the order for that piece of the driveway.
I would say that this proposal's much more in keeping with what we've typically interpreted before.
I like the idea of getting after this Japanese Nelly, although, man, as we all know, we got to play the same sort of.
Keep up with it. Just goes back.
As well as a condition that they should just do it on all of the Conservation Commission property that they've spent the next 40 years fighting.
Yeah, that is a long term.
It's bad that it comes from our parcel. It's where it started from, but
Oh, it's our.
Yeah, I think the actual owner is Nantucket Conservation Commission.
it's one of the 4 pieces left that the commission actually has deeded title to.
Any questions from the public on this one? Any other questions? Thoughts? Okay. I'm always covering my head. Do you have everything you need to close on this one?
I mean, if we want to condition that revised plan, that's fine. Or if you guys want to get it first, it's up to you guys.
It might be nice to see it.
Yeah, it might be a good idea to see the plan.
Okay.
But I think as long as Paul knows that that's a feasible direction, that's, because I think all of us are tired of kind of spinning in circles.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
if
I
you,
mean-
and obviously, if you feel that you're not gonna, it's not gonna, you know, I'm gonna come back in 2 weeks with that plan and we're gonna get a no vote, I won't, I mean, but I'm more than happy to do it, I think it's a, like I said, I come full circle, but I think it's a viable alternative, it's an approval, it would have been approvable then, I think it's approvable now, and happy to do that detailed plan on the backside, and then bring everything together, actually, so you're not looking at.
Yeah, for
It's
whatever reason.
I've got so many
No,
different.
there's a lot of plans.
There's so many different things here. One plan with everything on it, and it's basically, you know, this is the order we need to even complete the original project. And I have to have an order to complete the project, so I can't right now.
Ask for continuance.
Yeah, and we'll draft up the
Yes,
order
thank
to
you.
go with it.
All right, thank you. Oh, Jeff, that was you. Yeah, that's you there. That's you guys there. That wasn't Chris Paul.
Okay, amended orders of condition. Stephen L. Cohen, trustee, 6872, Illinois.
You can have one.
Oh, really?
For the applicant, Jeff Barrow. This is a project that's been pending before you for some time, and we hopefully finally resolve the issue with the butter. And this is for an amended order of conditions for the project, which was essentially residential redevelopment. There's two properties under common control ownership, and there had been two single-family dwellings. They were removed and new structures constructed to comply with the flood zone elevations. And the purpose of the amendment is twofold. One, on the plan which I prepared, you can see that there is in red is shown was an approved studio structure. And we're proposing, and that was a two-story structure, and had been the source of some contention. And we're proposing to convert that to a zoning shed, and that would be under 200 square feet, and 1 story, and then have just a deck at grade on the side of that shed where they could just put some chairs or whatnot, all within the footprint of the previously approved structure. So you can see in black the shed and the at-grade deck. And so that's really the only, and then out towards the beach, there were 2 existing boardwalks at grade that went out to the beach. I believe actually might have been 3 when we first started. And what we're proposing is to construct an elevated walkway up over the dune, and then to fill in both of the old paths, pick up the planks and everything, and then bring in just enough compatible sands to match the grade. That path is kind of worn in and cut in so that the dune is uniform slope, and there's also not a pathway for flood water or whatnot to come in through the dune there. And so and then the reason that the boardwalk is going in that position is so that it would respect the zoning sideline setback. So that's the reason for not putting it sort of in, was already the disturbed area there. And then to, make this all uniform dune across there would all be planted with the American beach grass. And then the other aspect in the bigger set of plans before you is really just finalizing the landscape design. It's all based on, America has worked with my base plans, and it, I think is, she sort of knows the standards as well that you expect. And so there are listings of the proposed plantings, and the driveways are the same as sort of what was already approved. I think there's maybe one shift of the parking right there, but for the most part it's This used to have a giant paved driveway. This was that site that went down with the paved loop driveway. And so all of the pavement's been, being removed as part of this, site restoration. And, I probably should have, in hindsight, maybe had her come to the meeting, but if there are questions, we can try to address them.
So I guess I'm still that there's what's going on here with these plantings?
So that was lawn area along there, and so any plantings there would have to be essentially dune compatible.
Right, because this is going through.
Right. And the idea is that would be an improvement to the existing situation where it would allow the movement of the sand under the walkway instead of sort of cutting it in. And there are more detailed drawings in there of that.
For whatever reason, I don't remember a lot of knotweed up there, but it could just
Yeah,
be
there's a
wrong.
standard knotweed that's coming in from over in here. Yeah, it's mostly right in here that I saw it near the property line, and I think the neighbor maybe has been working at it a bit.
And then that back line that's there, because when I was looking through the plan set, from where the landscaping ends and those pavers are, there's a little strip of lawn, and then that planting area after that lawn to the other is just being replanted with beach grass.
Okay.
And I did see some knotweed as well back along this bank right in here.
So everywhere it works is renaturalized. That
Yeah.
means beach grass, not shrubs,
Right.
as maybe this
Right.
suggests. Okay.
Yeah, the dune could be limited to beach grass plantings.
Okay.
And you could have a special condition to make sure that comes across loud and clear, and I'll also convey that.
Because I was wondering that same thing, and then when I started picking through the planting schedule, I saw that the beach grass had been spec'd for a minimum of 5,000 plugs. I was trying to figure out how you got all of those, but it's that whole area
Front area.
Yeah.
to take all those out. It's a lot of plugs. I don't envy who's getting to install all 5,000.
Well, plugging's that easy now. It's a no-brainer job.
I see them, they use a piece of rebar and they put a piece of rubber near the handle, like this.
They need like
And
a
they keep
little
the spacing.
mori to do it.
That's how it, on the banks anyway, I mean, same thing on heavy, but it goes pretty fast. But really, we just want to get everything in front of you that's sort of so that there's typical compliance. This is the final plan.
This one.
Very in depth.
Yeah.
They understand there's no fill proposed. This goes back to the same, the grades. I've been very clear with them with respect to, the lower portion of the site needing to maintain the grade that was there. And that was shown very detailed on the original permit plans. The last plans you may remember of mine that came in, there was just so many lines that I realized it as well. And I was going from trying to show you how the things had changed and having everything on one plan, build houses and whatnot. Then I thought that it's better probably just to show you the final, just what's proposed. The structures, other than what I started off with, are already approved.
So can we also make sure, just because I can't.
I think
Quite
when
parse
in
this
your
out.
packet, it should be a little easier to
Yeah,
read.
there are some, but within the 50-foot, making sure we have our native species in there.
Yeah.
Because I think that they aren't natives that are spec'd in here.
Yeah, most of the list isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, there's cedar and holly, but that's about it.
I can let her know that has to.
Where is it? 50 foot?
They come right.
The
The
50 to the
front, yeah.
dune, is that the 50 to the dune, not the bank? That's what you're talking about for the natives? Because otherwise
I know
the
there's
50,
another
the
line
50 is
here.
all of the,
Yeah.
most of the
I
property.
mean, really, I think
Right.
within 50 to any of our resource areas, we should be pushing for natives, but certainly to the dune.
Yeah, we already have the conditions in place that there are no cultivars allowed in the native planting areas. The descriptions are there.
I think that needs to refine that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you just simply,
Can get you a revised site plan or planting plan to Jeff, or keep it open, whichever you want.
I think you could just condition, just to say natives within a 50-foot setback will still do.
Yeah, that's basically from the house out.
Right. Which I think that was the concept, just to have coastal landscape like now.
I think you would just,
So the beach grass is the Carl Forster grass is not. I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah, one of the plans highlights that there's like a native block and then the other planting plans don't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not much. I mean, it's really close. I think it's really thoughtful. There's just maybe a couple of things that you could just trade out. Just find it.
yeah, so on the second to last sheet is the one that has the denaturalized areas. And those are the ones that are all spec for just beach grass.
Okay,
Those
so
areas.
what's that? I can't read that small. If you look at this grouping in here, so the 50 foot comes right across. Here,
That's
right?
correct, yeah, that's correct.
So pretty much everything out here, like this is all good.
Mhm.
This is all this is all bayberry through here. This, I think, though, is spec as Carl Forester.
Okay,
Feathery grass, that's not a native.
Okay.
So that should be changed out.
okay.
And then this is okay. This is all bayberry through here. So it's really just a Carl Forester. Feathery grass needs to be changed out.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll get a revised plan to Jeff before the work begins, if that was a condition.
Yeah, I think you would just simply, when you go to close and issue the amendment with that additional condition requiring that change. That would take care of it.
The only concern I had was the planting plan. It's kind of hard to read on the packet.
No. I would say, to Mirica's defense, she's one of the ones, she always is calling it plans.
Yeah, no, she's
That's
pretty.
good.
She puts together really thoughtful plans.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it for sure.
Any other concerns? Questions? Questions from the public on this one?
Yep.
Any recommendations for this one?
Yeah, I think you could close an issue with that additional condition.
Move to close an issue with the additional condition of a revised planting plan, which stipulates native species and cultivars.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous?
Thank you.
Thank you. Irwin, 87 Hummock Pond Road.
Gary?
Everybody on this board.
All right, if you guys want to get started, okay. I got this up.
Jeff Blackwell for the applicant, Terry Kelly, 88 Irwin. This is a property where a order of conditions was issued for to renovate two sheds that were separated by a few feet in distance, and to renovate that into a dwelling. That work is well underway. I'd say it's on the home stretch in terms of completion of that work. And at 325 square feet, it truly would satisfy anyone's definition of a tiny house. I've been in the house. If I can simplify my life and jettison my possessions, that's where I want to live. Editorial comment, but the application before you is to ask you to consider movement of a shed that was shown on the original permit plan,
whose placement is right on a wetland, literally a zero setback on one of the corners, and to relocate that shed up to the structure that's under renovation into a position where its setback would increase to a minimum of 26 feet from the wetland, the defined wetland. So it's a proposal that I think, by any standard, would be considered an improvement or a net benefit and a closer conformance to regulations. And it is one that I think is a good proposal. The resulting size of the structure will explode to 499 square feet. So it's still in the tiny house category. The area where the structure is to be removed would be replanted. Initially, I wasn't able to contact Terry before the deadline, so I had suggested the planting of some shrub-type species, but Terry feels like he would like to plant a large swamp maple and then use an acceptable grass mixture from the west instead. And I think that that has an element that those shrubs don't, which is a nesting possibility for wildlife. So I think that's a good move. The septic system that had originally been designed to be placed up close to the road outside the buffer zone has been abandoned, and the proposal now is to connect to the town sewer, which is in, after the permit is issued. Yeah.
The tanks,
Yeah.
I remember you put that line in.
The excavator is
No.
Is the sewer down that far?
Yes,
What it is?
Through myself and two other neighbors board down at the own streets. So it runs over there.
So I'll just say really quickly, because Jeff mentioned it, so this project obviously required a lot of waivers the first time around, and those waivers were granted under the no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative, and some of that was based upon the grandfathered location of the structures that are there. So as far as any sort of revision to the waiver for relocating that building, the waiver that's there would already cover that. You'd only be increasing the setback, not decreasing. So you wouldn't even have to tweak or deal with those.
Sounds good to me.
And we've given out the sewer waiver for septic as a net benefit. Not a benefit.
Easy one. I don't know. Looks pretty straightforward. Like an improvement.
I'll say having crawled on that site in the early 2000s, what's going on there is
Vast improvement.
vast. I think is an understatement.
There's been a lot of time on this one, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Slow process.
Any concerns from the public on this one? No? Jeff, the recommendation.
I recommend that you could close and issue the minute order of conditions.
Motion to close. Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Request for determination. Martha L. Berman, qualified person, residence trust. Berman. That's a lot. That's one long one. Yeah, 249 Pulpus Road.
Well, so Jeff has some time to back up.
Your guys is set.
You want to get started?
Okay. Jeff Blackmore for the applicant. This is a project to upgrade an existing septic system within the Nantucket Harbor Watershed District. The owners are preparing the property for placement on the market, and the Board of Health requirement is to upgrade the septic system to enhance treatment. So we're getting a jump on that, and the work proposed would be to install a septic tank chamber and a new septic tank, a 2-compartment tank within the existing driveway area. The closest corner of one of the tanks is about 76 feet to the delineated wetland boundary, and a leach trench is found to be functioning appropriately, so it's really adding 2 tanks to upgrade the system with the goal of reducing nitrates.
Can't argue with that one.
Sounds good. No concerns? No? Okay. Take your recommendation on this one?
Yes, I would recommend a positive 2 confirming the resource area boundaries and negative 3 to allow the work without a notice of intent.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Put this on. Thomas B. Kilborn and Elizabeth Westergaard, 1 South Cambridge Street.
Fortunately, I don't have plans.
What's up?
I don't have plans.
Okay.
I do. There is an approach.
Came with nothing?
Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants, representing the applicants. The RDA is being filed for a proposed shed that's outside of resource areas. And part of the proposal, or the RDA, is just confirm that there's no additional resources beyond Nantucket coastal storm flowage, which extends onto the property at elevation 7. The proposed shed is north of the existing home at 1 South Cambridge. 10 by 15 foot sheds could be on sonotubes, and this could just be some minimal regrading and minimal clearing around that structure. No proposed work within the flood zone itself. There's no coastal bank surrounding that Nantucket coastal storm flowage. And I had also taken 3 soil and vegetation plots within the front portion of the property, which is all vegetated at elevation 6, to confirm that there's no vegetated wetlands down there. Those plots are located on the site plan, and no indicators of high groundwater within 18 inches of any of those plots. And we have a dominant upland vegetation. There is a isolated vegetated wetland on the property to the south. There's a shared driveway with number 3 South Cambridge, and we've just estimated the approximate location of that just to give you a perspective of buffer zone projection, but that shed itself is outside 100 feet.
So it's just a flow zone.
Yeah,
But
there's no work in any resource areas, but just just wanted to cover all the bases.
Yeah, the soils are nice.
Yeah.
Nice and clear.
Yeah, I mean, we had worked on the South Cambridge Street paving job, and had flagged that wetland to the south. There's little elevation change there, but it's clear out of the soils.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
Right, this will be a little different. This is a positive 2, confirming the Nantucket coastal storm flowage in the buffer zone, and a negative 4 for the work not in the area subject to jurisdiction. Usually have negative 3s. This is negative 4.
So moved.
They make those orders are so much easier for motions and things. They're way less confusing than ours.
It's just numbers. Someone will make a motion?
I so moved.
Oh, okay. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Good. 32 Westchester Nominee Trust, 32 Westchester Street.
Brian Madden, Riley Scene Environmental, representing the applicant, 32 Westchester Street Trust. And this RDA is being filed to confirm that no wetland resource areas exist on the subject parcel. It's at the corner of Westchester and Westfield Place. There are off-site vegetated wetlands to the south of the property that were subject to a 2006 determination of applicability. We did show those on the site plan of record, and in between the property and that wetland boundary, there's an existing gravel driveway, lawn area, and a little garage that doesn't show up on the site plan. You can see that in the and there's also a drainage ditch within the right-of-way to Wesco Place that minimally does creep onto the property. That drainage ditch has been in place since at least the early 70s. The property owners had bought the property in the early 70s, and that drainage ditch was existing at the time. I believe back then Wesco Place was dirt or gravel, and there was a lot more drainage that flowed down from Westchester and Wesco, and the town had created that ditch to receive some of that runoff. Back in the early 2000s, there was some issues with drainage in this area and a lot of backup of water. Further down to the property is kind of the low point connecting point of the town drainage lines. And there was a backup, and there's an existing manhole covered just off-site within the Wesco Place right-of-way. And there was an 8-inch pipe that connected to that drainage ditch, and that started to back up and flood. So the property owners had started to work with DPW. There's several efforts to help clean out the pipes. In 2002, Wesco Place was paved, and they put a Cape Cod berm on the east side of it, and there was a catch basin put within the roadway itself. The drainage issues didn't really fix themselves at that point in time, so the town went in 2004 to clean out that drainage ditch, plug that 8-inch culvert pipe to the manhole, and then clean out some excess sediment. So under existing conditions, that drainage ditch has about 4 to 6 inches of crushed stone, a lot of organic debris that's kind of filled in, but it's pretty narrow in nature. It's about like 6 inches deep. You can see in the middle of it, there's a pump chamber, and excess water gets pumped to that catch basin in Wesco Place. And so it's been maintained over the years, and since 2004 when it was cleaned out, there hasn't been any drainage or flooding issues on the property since. So again, the RDA is to confirm that there's no resource areas on the subject.
So just to make clear, I don't know if Brad said it or if I was just not paying attention. If he did, constructed drainage facilities, even if they have the presence of wetland vegetation, don't qualify under our local regulations as jurisdictional. So that's why, in this case, even if you go out and see soft rush or jewel weed or something that's in there, as long as it's clearly documented as constructed for the purpose of drainage, it's not jurisdiction.
So the soils up here aren't so wet as in some other.
No, I mean, between the elevation between the property and that wetland, which is part of the Lily Pond wetland system, is maybe about like a 1 to 2 foot elevation change.
We'll say when we went out to walk the site, the boys came in and went through it, and we augured a couple holes, and you could see some oxidized rhizospheres on occasion, but we didn't pick up anything significant enough to key out as true hydric soils. And it's definitely an area that I think in big rain events and things over there probably gets a significant amount of water that lands on it and may sit for a bit because it's still kind of close to groundwater, but not close enough to form those hydric soils. So there's probably, I mean, I can't say that I see the site every day through every storm, but I bet there's times of the year where there's probably some significant water that comes across and moves across the property and sits for a bit. Probably
Yeah, I think
things that are there.
just some of the runoff from up around Sunset Hill. I think this is kind of just like a breakout point in the drainage ditch.
Yeah. And to be honest, the drainage on Wesco Place is just, it's abominably poor.
Yeah.
And there's pipes that are all into the road from basements and everywhere, and it's kind of, Wesco Place is kind of a mess. Westchester's also a mess, but for different reasons. But it's an area where they're impacted by water. But I mean, I think I augured about 8 to 10 holes just to poke around and look. Didn't find anything that jumped off the page in these hydric stuff. I see if there's anyone from the public.
Yeah, sure. Any public concern, comment, question? Seeing none. Got your recommendation. Oh,
I'm Morgan Montgomery. I live in that area and I've been there for 30 years. And he's right, there used to be huge amounts of water issue there. It used to be basically a pond that cottages now. And a few years ago, we did some from the drainage there. So, haven't seen it hugely wet, but started that when there's big storms, water definitely sits in that area. And I don't know, there's so much water coming down from Westchester and off the properties, into West Coast Place. But I wouldn't sure where to do something. I wouldn't know exactly how much
I mean, I honestly think in kind of walking the site, and I appreciate the fact that I wasn't crazy thinking that it probably holds water. My guess is that at some point when they constructed that drainage basin, they probably actually made the drainage on this site worse by creating a berm on the one side up to the road and with Wesco it's raised, where instead of it sheeting across and then sheeting down into the Lily Pond into the bigger wetland, and anyone that's been down Wesco, that wetland down there is gigantic. That they probably flung it onto the lot and trapped it. It didn't have anywhere to put it.
Yes,
So
especially when they block up that 8 inch.
yeah, and that probably a history of trying to control the way the water is sheeting, making it worse and worse and worse on this spot. But I'll be honest, I was surprised to not find some of those spots in hydric soils, but there's no vegetation and no clearly keyable hydric soils in those areas. Definitely some signs that it holds some water, but nothing that's, like I said, nothing that I think if you applied the state criteria or even the federal criteria, you would get hydric soils in. Not for lack of trying.
yeah. I remember seeing water in there recently. In the past, plenty water.
Well, it was concerning to me to go onto the site visit. There's still some things that I'm chasing there. Just parking on the side of Wesco Place there, and there were 3 hoses or 2 pipes the day that I was there that were going into the street or into other spots, and you just kind of track where all of them are going and try to chase them down.
I could probably, just for clarification, what I'm actually telling Bracken Engineering. I did meet out there yesterday with the DPW to look at it and try to figure out where things are. I think those hoses that are pumping in the road right now are a result of a construction project breaking the pipe that went down there. So instead of the pipe connecting to the system, now they're piping it over. So DPW is working with them
Yeah.
to install some kind of pipe.
Yeah.
They're also working on trying to find a couple of the culverts that have completely grown over and disappeared to help the water flow through the system a little better rather than backing up the way it is. So, and I was trying to get some confirmation on the people that are in DPW now have any history with the trenches, so forth, but they didn't recall. They said they would keep looking, but I don't think we're going to find anything besides what the owner had given us emails from Jeff Follett and so
Yeah,
the
I
time
think
frame
that's-
of what happened.
I think
That's all
this-
we have.
I think this
Yeah.
is a system that the design probably left when Jeff Follett passed away.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably in this head. Yeah, so,
Now, on
anyway, that's just an update. They are trying to work on getting their water to flush out really better.
with that being said, I would say that my recommendation would be for a positive 2 with the boundaries being correct as shown.
Okay, most moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? Passes. Thank you. Minor mods. Joanne D. Patel, Nantucket Trust, 12 North Liberty.
Brian Madden from LEC Environmental, representing the trust. This project, this subject parcel received an order of conditions this past June for a new cottage and some invasive species management. For recreation goals, I had prepared a invasive species management plan. No work to get started on the site, but just with some further analysis, the property owner just wanted to expand the proposed invasive species management area about 15 to 20 feet to the west. Previously had kind of stopped somewhere right around there. Around here. And if you remember, there's 2 willows in that area that are encased by bittersweet and box fruit that were going to be treated. But so for the plans of record, we wanted to show the complete invasive species management area and that westerly bump out to the property line, towards the property line, is just basically invasive multiflora rose and bittersweet. So we just wanted to include the entire area. And I updated the invasive species management plan, which is basically just to involve hand removal of the multiflora rose and bittersweet, bagging it up and bringing that to the digester in accordance with the original order of conditions, special conditions. And again, the ultimate goal is to restore the entire management area with native species, which were included in the original application or approval.
Questions? Some public comments? Any questions? Jack? Recommendation on this one?
I would say this is a classic minor modification.
Move to issue the minor mod.
Second. All in favor? Vote. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Water's Edge. NT. 16 Dowry Creek Road. Time to get the preview. What's going on?
So this is Art Gaspar from the record before you tonight for modification to the footprints of approved structures within the building envelopes. I was before you a few meetings ago for the main house. You didn't realize, didn't think they would understand that they were going to do this as well. And the architects gave me these, or I would have done them all at the same time. But it's essentially the same thing. They've been in planning processes for quite a while after everything, the settlement and whatnot that happened with the long permitting process. And what I've shown in red are is the 50-foot buffer zone, and then also in red are the approved structures, and then in black are the proposed structures. And then the one aspect that's a little bit different is that there had been a swimming pool previously approved up at the main house site. They're not going to build it at that site. They want to build a long, narrow pool down at this site. And it's within, again, the previously approved limits and the what was agreed upon with natural heritage. And so it's basically a second dwelling and then sort of a pool house, barn, exercise type. This long, I think I included the architectural, there's a big pergola. That's what that long thing is. And then that's the structure there. And again, it'll all be served by IA septic systems, and it'll pump up to back over here is that big field. And that's all the same. They're not proposing more bedrooms than what was approved. It's just really a reconfiguration of the footprint outside of the 50, all outside of the 50.
What's going on with the fence and maybe the corner of the pergola being outside?
It's right on it. We actually staked it today, and I was curious, and it fell pretty much like right on the line there. We're still, that is, far outside any other resource area. So if we had to go to natural heritage for an adjustment to that, we would. But there's no. That was just a drawing that I got. If we had to hold it to that line, we could. But again, it's not going towards the 25 or into the 50, or it's in an area that I think that's allowed. So I wanted to show it and hope that was okay, with understanding that it's not, the structural elements aren't going outside. It would just be the edge of clearing to get around right there, which I think would have to go back to them.
But sorry if you repeat yourself here.
Yep.
Is this is that 50?
That's the 50.
So does that pool fence come outside the 50?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. I actually didn't catch that. So
look at the gate.
right, yeah, no, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. So obviously, would accept a condition. They'll just have to revise that to keep the pool fence outside of the 50. And I can submit a revised drawing, and we can hold it if you felt best about that, or as long as the drawing had the pool fence outside of the 50, which they'll just have to make a revision.
I'd say without natural heritage saying if you go outside the approved limit of work, I don't feel comfortable approving it outside that previously approved line.
Yeah, I personally feel comfortable keeping it inside the approved limit of work.
And outside
Right.
50.
Right. If you're able to change that thing, then that line, then obviously you can keep it in. That's right.
I would say it's just administrative things. I tend to agree personally with that stance, but the natural heritage line is not a jurisdictional line for us to regulate activity to. We regulate only to the 25, 1500 and the resource area down here. So it's it's weird to say it this way. It's almost like a zoning line in the sense that it's there and there are rules and restrictions that go with that. And while it's approved that reviews applications and provides us comments, we don't have regulatory authority to enforce the restrictions of that line. I know it's kind of weird because this site is probably the most, maybe behind Norwood Farm, the most heavily regulated natural heritage site on the island that I'm aware of for land management activities and things. And most of that work is outside of our jurisdiction of what we're doing. So it's another one of those. It's another layer of the onion, so to say, in this case.
And that additional cleared area is actually out. You can see it's outside the 50.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something that you wouldn't approve.
Right.
It's just so they can get around sort of the structure there. But the pool fence, I agree completely. I just didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, technically, I don't think they have to have a pool fence that far away from everybody else. Isn't it like a distance thing? I think if you're
don't know, but I don't know that I.
Not that I would ever.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Cool.
Right, I would
Yeah.
probably recommend that.
I mean, I know in
Deer in
I know in
there.
Maryland it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, deer
Yeah.
swimming in your pool.
Yes,
Well, they'll
yeah,
step
gotten
over the
trapped
fence.
in there.
Okay. Well, so how do we want to word this one? Just whether or not we just approve it as it is.
Well, I think
It
you
has to
could,
be removed
you,
out of
you could approve the minor mod with the condition that the pool fence has to be located outside of the 50 foot.
Okay, right.
I think that's fine.
That's fine. I'll make that motion.
Okay, definitely. Okay, do we have a second?
Yes, I
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Vote faster. Okay. Certificates of compliance. Sip and Seed Trust. North Road.
Sip and See, 10 North Road. I gotta say the sidewalk for this is pretty awesome. So this one for 10 North Road is was for the redevelopment, I think is the fair word to use, of the site for the structures and the pool and second dwelling is a pretty heavy reworking, I guess I would say. Everything was built in accordance with the plans though. The plan of record, everything's in place the way it should be. It is important to note that other stuff that's taken place may be on separate permits on the lot, but this section was done in compliance, and I don't believe there was just one ongoing condition as it related to the pool, and that was that it must be drained or discharged to an area outside of our jurisdiction. So I would recommend that it could be issued with that ongoing condition.
I'll make that recommendation.
move the issue.
Second. All in favor? Any opposed? And pass it unanimously. I have to refuse and count them.
Okay, so certificate of compliance for Kaplan, 8 Harborview Way.
Yep, this was just the elevating of an existing structure. They provided the as-built showing that's there. None of the grades were outside of what we would normally accept. They timed it correctly. Paul provided an elevation certificate demonstrating that the building was meeting the flood zone. And I would recommend that this could be issued with no ongoing conditions.
Anyone want to make a motion?
Move the issue. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That closes with Commissioner Bennett refused.
Let's see. Thinking. Woodstock Beach Property LLC, 101 Cliff Road.
All right, so this was, within our jurisdiction, was just for the construction of a shell driveway. This is that little drainage wetland that was the mitigation for the Cliff Road bike path. It runs by there, but it's constructed outside of the 25 and is constructed in compliance with the order. I recommend it get issued with no ongoing conditions as well.
Motion to issue.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Pass unanimously. A&B Realty Trust, 5355 Baxter Road.
Okay, A&B Realty Trust, this one was for the relocation of the existing structure, relocation of the driveway, with grading landscaping. This was essentially a bank retreat project. Again, this is separate from we have another order that relates to some of the work on the path and on the bank and some of those. But this work was done in compliance with the order. The other work is okay too, but just a separate order, not part of the request. And I would recommend that this could be issued with no ongoing conditions as well.
Approved issue. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No.
Is there anything on the agenda?
Updates.
Just sewer and stuff?
Yeah, I think that will go.
Okay. Take what that's now. Where's the conditions for it? Very few.
We got a few done.
Well, yeah, although we're, let's see. We're waiting on flight note 4.
New plan. Is that a general, just to kind of help me get started on it, was that a general that if that switch is within those areas that was headed toward a positive order for 74?
I guess that's one with the, since it's a mitigation, we should probably do a survival percentage
Yep.
plans.
Oh, cool. Ratchet it up.
I don't know, what do you guys think about it?
I think it's appropriate, you know, I mean, I think that,
Pre-existing driveway.
yeah, I think that, I do think that it would have been approved had they come in with Paul's
Right.
plan now.
Right, especially those bills, those sites. that
Yeah,
are
and just-
better, so.
Especially because the driveway did exist, so they
Yeah.
were, you know, it's not like they were asking to put it in.
So, I will say that, another thing is, since I kind of summary Paul at the last meeting on that one, is, he and I talked about it this week, and I told him, I said, you need to get close. You know, if it was 8,000 square feet before, you gotta come back, even if you want to keep that driveway, and you gotta be within reason of that number. So I think the commission's willing to listen to close,
Yeah.
if you can do it, but I don't think you can say, we asked, we're supposed to do 8,000, so we're gonna keep the driveway and we're gonna do 1,500 square feet.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna tell you to find your way out the door
Right.
again. So, I think that's where he was coming from with that change, so, and I think that's kind of, I tend to agree, I think that's kind of in keeping with practice of the commission to do some of those things, so I don't think it was crazy, I think, doing it. I do think it may be one, though, that, since we've had trouble completing this project before, is also including some sort of performance bonding that if we're getting to the end, that work's not done, to say, well, we're gonna just hire someone to go do it. And have to do it.
I like that. I like some increased monitoring on
Because it's something where I think we'll have something that has a little bit more notice to when things are going on in pre-construction meetings and those things that we don't normally have for projects like this because it hasn't. They didn't get it done the first time. I know the owners have changed, and I'm sure after going through a longer permitting process than probably necessary, they kind of understand where it is. But I think to have some milestone checks with them for this is when work's starting, when planting has been completed, we're going to be back out, and just be more present on that site, make it a part of the permit, to have notice that's through there. So if all of a sudden it's been 6 weeks and we haven't heard from them, you can just say, we're coming. So if you haven't done it, call your landscaper, get it done right now, because we'll be there in an hour. So have it done. Just to make sure that it actually gets underway and completed this time instead of like last time. Because it was still like a positive message to get out there. If people are choosing to not do parts that are required to, then it becomes a lot more difficult, and it becomes a lot more, natural resources staff stopping by for, coffee and scones in the morning to check on your landscape products. So,
You should be so lucky, huh?
you'd be amazed. Some people, you stop by and like, come in for a coffee or tea or do things.
It's kind of sweet.
Other people
Not
are.
allowed to give pictures.
Other people will just knock and open the door and say, "Do what you have to do."
There's a cost of
right.
muffin.
So,
Yeah.
as long as it's less than $50.
Of course, on Nantucket, depending on the bakery, it could be,
If they were to give each of us a muffin, it could be more than
So,
yeah.
all right, so that we're there. All right, just to kind of keep going down the list.
Okay. 2020 Mass Ave.
Oh, we skipped one. We closed 12 North Road.
Yes.
Yeah, but we,
We have to talk about it to
Right, we're
prepare
gonna talk about
something.
I need
direction.
to.
I think that's a good word.
So North Road, so we need a nourishment plan.
Well, they've provided there's, but I think we can memorialize that in the order.
They related to a Jeff Road.
I think the bigger question is there, and And I think it was pretty clear that you guys want kind of a assortment of choices for potential punitive action for this. I'll try to get creative, I guess. Figure out something that's legally defendable.
I mean, it did,
So-
they did come in front of us pretty quickly on the wall.
It seemed like it was kind of a slow move.
It was. It took
Took a
until
while.
like
Took
this
like a
fall.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
They came right away and were like, "We're sorry. Now we gotta get
They
a
were-
deal."
they were-
Is
You could tell they didn't have a lot of time.
we issued it.
Yeah.
They responded immediately.
Yeah.
We met on site, and then it took a few months for
Yeah.
them to get stuff. And I understand that some of it's complicated, but it took a bit. And I know from talking to them a couple times that their designs and things changed somewhere in there too. So, but there's still I think you can pick a time window in there for something if you want to go down that path. You know, to be fair, I do think, you know, we've already fined someone once for a structure that was ultimately permitted once already. So I think that looking at something punitive would be certainly within keeping of, you know, recent behavior of the commission. I think that would definitely be kind of fitting to some degree.
Agree.
I mean, what it is and where it functions in there is one thing. And if it's something that it doesn't go into the order and gets issued out separately, can get sorted out. But I think that there are a number of ways to crack that egg. And I think having 3 or 4 decent ones to pick from, I think is something that's doable. And if it gets down to 1 or 2 to pick from, it's easy. So, but I think that's there. But if everyone generally thinks beyond there, that the rest of it's moving into a positive order from what it is given the situation.
Kind of hard to believe, but I mean, right? I mean, we all saw it the first time. We're like, oh my God.
So, interestingly enough,
I know, we were-
it wasn't really driven into that conversation, but having that talk with DEP this week, I think it's an issue that they're wrestling with in
Yeah.
these cases where
Obviously, comment.
the conditions to which a permit was gained changed, but stuff had been permitted and closed out in compliance. So you're just moving into ongoing, and I don't think anyone really understood the magnitude of ongoing conditions at the time. And now that decisions have come out that if you didn't list them as ongoing conditions, they're dead as soon as the certificate of compliance is issued. You know, it'd be really awesome to rewind the clock to like 1992 when some of this stuff was permitted and certs were issued, dealt with them. But I do think there's ways to address moving forward with strict failure criteria and reporting. And then I honestly think putting a finding in the order that specifically says special conditions, whatever they turn out to be, 23 through 30 or whatever it is that relates to those criteria and the nourishment gets specifically called out that says that they are required to be ongoing onto a certificate of compliance. That way, if none of us are here when it comes in, whoever picks that up can look at that and say, that must have been important to be dealing with. That you can kind of memorialize things that way to make sure that that's not forgotten or that's not kept up with. So,
We are going to get to a point where there's not going to be sand to nourish these things, and people are just
Yeah,
going to
it's
stop
gonna be
doing
very
it,
Yeah.
and that's going to be an issue. They're going to have to remove them.
I do think this would be an interesting one too, just to kind of think out loud about an order.
Yeah.
That having a finding that would simply say, you know, the commission finds that should the bulkhead require significant repair, that the commission encourages conversion to a softer solution in this area or something to memorialize that. They haven't really done that before, and it's not regulatory. It's more of a stance of the board.
Right.
And I think
getting for future board members just the tone of the snapshot of today, you know, it's like, listen, we're not there.
Because that's the thing is, by the time all of this comes back, if you know, like Terry Kelly's permit tonight is when it expires, it's going to be 10 years old. that there's a really significant chance that 10 years from now, most of us probably won't be here, like on this board or doing it. I mean,
No, hope not.
I may still be stuck here. The rest of you guys, I mean, you guys very well may, but I think there's a really good chance that.
That's what John McLaughlin said. What? Hey,
So I think it's important to try to figure out ways to capture those things. That's kind of the long and short of it. I think I have a pretty good idea with that this header. So I can draft something up for you guys to look at. And we can kick it again, and if Kevin is requesting it to be pushed for a vote to a certain date, it certainly doesn't preclude us from reviewing it and making any tweaks and changes in which one we're doing. So, as long as we don't take a vote on the request.
Right.
So, all right.
Okay. Okay, moving on to our Thomas and James are Huckanut trustees, 2023 Mass Ave.
This was just for the tight tank? Oh, yeah, so I didn't really have any conditions for this.
Yeah,
It
it's
seemed
pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And Robert K. and Lacey P. Branch, 4 Ames Ave.
Another tight tank.
This was also for the relocation of the house. This is the one where the house is getting close to the bank. And I'll be honest, I just asked for photographs of the restored areas to see what they look like. To be fair, I don't think some of those restored areas are going to last very long. So it may be kind of moot.
Well, what about the issue that it may not be according to the current plan? Isn't that one where they're going to try and get it moved further back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is this the foundation one?
Yeah, they want to put a foundation in it.
Because I don't think that that's appropriate.
So the problem that we have is I agree that it shouldn't be on the full foundation pilings.
Oh,
The structure that's being proposed is located outside of the 100-foot setback.
I was like, can't say anything about that.
The deck across the 100-foot line.
So how does that work then? When you add the 50 feet, it just doesn't matter because it's like 3 feet out right now, but it would be within.
Well, it's 100 feet. Well, we can't. You don't get to expand the buffer zones, right? Jurisdictionally, our jurisdiction ends at the 100. So
the calculation on the erosion rate,
it's
20.
It's 20 times the erosion rate, or 100 feet,
whichever
is the minimum.
Whichever's the minimum.
So in this case, it would be 100.
Yeah.
If it's outside the 100, then
Okay, sounds good.
Probably a building department.
Next week it might be.
Right.
You know.
That's what I'm thinking.
Well, no, but that's the thing. But our jurisdiction ends. So, well, I think all of us probably agree putting a full basement underneath that thing is a waste of money. And it's just going to make a mess. If it's outside the 100, we unfortunately don't have a way to bury it. That's going to be.
Yeah.
Sorry. I always feel like I'm telling everyone bad news for this.
No,
Well,
I
that
mean,
one's
it's
bad
just,
for our resource. Like that's like a funny little loophole almost. That maybe when we look at our regs.
Well,
I think
even when we look at our regs,
So-
as soon as it crosses that magic 100-foot line, our regs can be the greatest regulations that have ever been written, but they end. And you can't predictively regulate. Sorry, I was afraid that dirt teach once. I was like, predictively.
Otherwise, everything on Nantucket would be in our jurisdiction for coastal banks sooner or later.
Maybe.
That's right. Okay. Well, this one's
That's just
pretty straightforward then. Okay. So, pretty straightforward going fucking bad. So, we want to make a motion to
The issue is drafted.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Oh,
Oh, well, I'm part.
Ashley's opposed.
Okay. Commissioner Harrison opposed.
That foundation will be on the beach
I got
faster
you.
than it's poured.
Here.
Should get the fill up from Zula's Burn, the middle of the street.
I don't want to talk about from Zula.
Monitoring reports. Talk about the
Real
year.
piece of work.
All right, so
What's up?
normally we just approve monitoring reports. This is a pretty significant project, so I know it's in the packet, but Art asked if he thought it'd be a good idea just to kind of present it, and I thought, yes, it would be a good idea to kind of hear the condensed version or kind of the summary of findings, considering it's one of the larger erosion control projects that we've had. Coastal bank stabilization.
For the applicants, Architect Farrell, we are just about 1 year from the permitting of the project, and it got installed, as you know, last over the course of last winter. And I've been going out there regularly. Probably every time I was on the boat, I went and checked it out. And, the growth this year and how well it did, I was quite pleased with it. From the beginning, the Wilkinson team did the work. We stayed in touch. We had pre-construction meetings with Jeff. I think the only thing that really for the whole project was, some concern with the construction access on that proprietor's way. It did, it was as approved, but still sometimes can be a little bit of a surprise to some folks when you, create the accesses that it takes to get in there. I believe the project was done in complete compliance. Two of the neighbors have opted to hold off for some period of time before installing the stabilization along their properties. I'm hopeful that they will decide to do so, in the near future. Permit is obviously good for 3 years. So those two properties, at least luckily, were adjacent to each other. So we do have an area in the middle of the project that doesn't have stabilization, and it's on both ends. So the rolls are installed. We were out there during construction. We did the pre-construction survey. We set benchmarks on the beach for elevations for them, rebars, caps. We staked out the limit of work, the high water line and limit of work, as was required. Those stakes were maintained the whole time that they were working. They had an on-site project manager every day, a supervisor type position. They were, a great crew to work with, very, very mindful of the resource areas. Since then, I know that there was a comment, at the end of one of the past meetings concerning the irrigation. The irrigation is, obviously seasonal. It's part of the irrigation systems. I think that the plants rely on the irrigation, especially for the new plantings. And the whole point of the project was to get a vegetative, stable, bank. And they're not fertilizing. It's strictly, I think that it would probably do more harm than good to have, periods of no irrigation in the middle of the summer. They are set up as zones on the individual owners, irrigation systems. They are controllable. I know you had some discussion in here, and I've had the same discussion with, it's been a while, but back to rain sensors and moisture sensors and automatic shut-off devices. They're all notoriously unreliable, is what I'm told, and so it's really about having a proper clock program for the season is the best way that I've been told, from the guys at Waterworks as well as landscapers. It's something I've talked to them about it, back about 10 years ago. It had been a bit of a discussion item quite a bit, at the commission level. The truth is, I don't think that there is, an adverse impact that's happening from the watering of the plants. I don't see any evidence of, gullying or runoff from overwatering. I understand the point that, it had been after a rain or even during a rain, and, the system came on, but that's just subject to a clock. I don't think that it's realistic to have, somebody shut off, irrigation or change a program every time that it rains. But I think it's more important to monitor and look for their problems or situations of basically shallow channel flow, where it goes from hopefully the plants are using it all when you have heavy rain, there are areas where you're not having sheet flow, but you're actually getting some concentration. I didn't see anything, out of the ordinary there. So for the most part, and then following the winter storm, I think that the ice in the harbor really helped limit the really damage to a lot of most of the harbor banks. I didn't see whether stabilized or protected or not. All the sites that I've been to, I haven't seen apparent, for a surge like that. Like when we had Juno a couple of years ago, that same surge caused quite a bit of erosion. And just my sort of, I attribute it to the thick ice that we have from sort of limiting and not allowing that sort of sediment transfer out. And you see the photos I took. I was literally there the very next morning, and I've been there since. And there's really nothing else to, report there. We're going to do another survey here, before the season. But I wanted to get the stuff into you. I sort of am sitting on it, and at what point did I come in? So I just wanted to kind of compile everything after the 1 year we are monitoring. I don't believe there's any need for additional sand at the moment. As soon as there was any, there's literally no obvious loss of the cover material. And I think getting to the point of concerns that were out there during the permitting process for the harbor and for eelgrass and for over sedimentation, we want to be mindful of that, keep you apprised, and same thing of any nourishment or sand delivery that's brought in before that happens. Notify Jeff, have a discussion about volume and whether to do that at this time. I don't think it's necessary, but they have me watching it. But keep at it, keep doing surveys, and keep giving you the plans. I think on the next set of plans, I think we had discussed this in the permitting, but it didn't make sense with just that sort of post-construction survey. The next one would be to include the past tops and bottoms of banks, maybe in different colors. So I think that's what we really want to be looking at there is, is there a retreat or a migration or a change that's happening, not only here, but as you go, east and west. Moving to the west, that owner, has drip fence and maybe had done some nourishment a while ago, but again, you can tell from the fence that there's really not, there just hasn't been any real significant, I don't think, erosion that's happened there, at least since this project has gone in. And I'm happy to,
Looks good.
try to give you any additional information or always be available at any point, on the project if there are, concerns. And I did hear the concerns when they came up. I'm listening. I'm always, if they have me retained, so if there's anything at all, I'm happy to try to address them. They want me to be proactive, the group that I'm working for.
This one was pretty successful so far, huh?
Yeah, it's really, it's what I hope for. Likewise, the Shimo, installation, a lot of the sand was lost at that spot, and I wonder if that has to do with less ice in there or different wind exposure. But there was no damage, on that one, and so I'm working with Seth on that one. I think they're going to do the report, but I'm going to do the survey. That's really not much to survey because the roles are the roles that we've already got to stick with compliance in that particular project. But there is a difference where the plantings there aren't coming out of the tubes and successful there, but it's completely successful above. So
Yeah, that was
funny because we were just doing did the certificate of compliance at 10 North Road,
yeah.
which directly abuts that project.
Right.
And you can go down there now and you see the core tubes and all of the sand is missing. You can just see how they step down. And above it, it's like nothing ever happened. I mean, it's perfect.
It's stable.
So,
the vegetation versus the sliding that we were getting. So there's a sand contribution, that was performed as designed. And at 10 North, when you just did the cert for, I owe you a report on that one. That's at a hard spot. That's where the end of the bulkhead is. It's coming over from 12, where it's all continuous. So keeping sand in there is a little bit more difficult with the other pieces. But there was no damage that noticed to the array either. So we're not losing the materials the way we sort of were with the sand filled tubes. Sort of later story for the next meeting.
I will say quickly, it didn't look like there were so many of those projects, but somewhere in there, a little chunk of core even on the beach in that corner. Not sure where it's from.
That part could have been also the surface netting.
It's a pretty solid piece.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like it's from those two projects, so I'm not sure where it came from. You might have to check the markings on it.
Okay.
I do agree with Art on the irrigation component. I think that, particularly where we really want to see high success rates, there's no way these things are going to be successful without ongoing irrigation, at least for the first year, if not two, to get them established. Nobody wants to over the water, but if the more important thing is getting these banks stabilized.
Yeah. Especially if there's not fertilizer being added, then
nothing's leaching down through,
BMP is if you fertilize and over irrigating, all your fertilizer just washes, your fertilizer's gone.
Right, but this is pretty innocuous.
I think that may be something that may be an area that is, obviously, the Wilkinson style project is something that we're seeing a lot of now, more and more and more and more, is looking at developing how we're monitoring that irrigation in a sense where maybe the permit has kind of a cutoff date for irrigation unless reporting shows that it's still necessary, there's a lack of vegetation. Because I agree that it's definitely proven to be super effective for establishing a lot of these plants, but having a mechanism to know when it's time to, even if it's just turning the zone off, if vegetation's clearly established and it's there, but having some sort of criteria for that may be, all these orders evolve over time because there's a piece of information that's different or changes or how we view it is different. That may be something to look at really how, and it's going to be different from site to site on how it's functioning and how it's working. But for not seeing any impacts from it too, that's always good. So.
Established beach grass must either have really deep roots or it's very drought tolerant, one or the other, because if it's growing on dunes, it's got to be.
Yeah, once it,
I think that's the one thing that's tricky with these too, is it's such a blend of shrubs and beach grass and a lot of other grasses and forms and things that the water requirements for all those is going to be a little bit different for how that's going to play out. I think this is again just my personal opinion, but the more I see these in the blend that some of the plants get above what's traditionally just been beach grass, and the immediate returns that you seemingly are getting from that diversity and establishment of those woodier and shrubbier plants, I think it's going to be something we're going to be seeing more and more of. Just because when you go and you see a site where, all right, you lost your sand, above it looks like the day you put it in, just with bigger plants. I think that's something that people that have been losing sand and grass for the last 10 years on a regular basis are going to look at and say, that seems much better than what I've been doing. It's going to show up more. I won't be surprised. I don't know the same for Archway, but I think there'll be a big stretch of a lot of those eel points. Well, I think there's going to be a big stretch of the people on like the Eel Point and the North Shore and in the harbor that start to see these successes, and people that have other systems, instead of investing in sand and grass every year, start looking to stuff that is more like this. 121 is one that's making a switch.
Right, that's why I think it's
I mean,
borrow, right?
Yeah, it's already got a patent coming. Yeah, but I think it's coming. So I mean, I think anytime we have a chance to improve our conditioning, this is what we should try to take advantage of.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Sorry.
Okay, other business, approval of minutes. Everyone's happy with that? Approved by names. Enforcement actions? Excellent.
I'm still just coming out of the deep dark hole of sewer break and getting caught up.
Oh, God.
I walked out of that and was just delivered the SBPF application. And I was like, awesome. So which brain are we going to break next week so I can stay away from this as long as possible?
Have they figured out if they extend the damage on the main sewer yet?
No.
It's gonna take a while.
Let's hope not.
No,
That's
well,
done a better job about saying reduce water usage
Yeah.
on
So-
their messages.
Okay. We had an MPDC at a meeting, but nothing. Scale control, I'm sure it's not
More
concerned.
now.
Commissioner comments? No. Administrative staff reports?
No, let's get out of this.
Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second? On favor? Okay. Thanks, guys.